The Alex 7 orbital station silently revolved above the northern hemisphere of Gliese 667c, its solar panels capturing the faint light of a red dwarf star. The 6-member science crew was on the 43rd day of a routine mission when the first signal arrived. A series of radio pulses at frequencies that shouldn't exist, originating from an empty point in space, 120 kilometers from the station. Brianna Mocha, mission coordinator, adjusted the electromagnetic telescope's parameters a dozen times, but the readings remained unchanged. The phenomenon, if it was an object at all, moved along a trajectory defying Newtonian physics, accelerating and decelerating without detectable propulsion. In the control room, Alec Human, orbital dynamics specialist, rubbed his tired eyes. The graphs on his screen displayed an impossible curve, as if the space around the event was being warped. "This isn't an asteroid or a ship," he murmured, more to himself than to Brianna. "It's as if the vacuum itself is breathing." The first attempt at approach occurred at 17 hours and 13 minutes station time. An unmanned probe was launched, equipped with high-resolution sensors and a real-time data transmitter. As the capsule advanced through space, the monitors displayed grainy images of something that appeared simultaneously solid and fluid. Its surface reflected patterns of light that corresponded to no known source. 23 minutes into the flight, the probe stopped transmitting. There was no explosion, no sign of damage, just silence. The following morning, during analysis of the residual records, theoretical physicist Kiera Chen pointed out an anomaly. The gravitational data indicated that the phenomenon wasn't just moving, but distorting the space around it. "It's as if it's creating a path that doesn't exist," she said, tracing lines in the air with her fingers. "Like a river deciding to change its course in the middle of the desert." The metaphor, as poetic as it was, didn't reassure anyone. As the days passed, the crew's sleep cycles began to destabilize. Alex started seeing peripheral shadows that vanished when he turned. Brianna, always methodical, spent hours reviewing obsolete protocols, as if trying to find answers in checklists. It was Kiera who suggested the hypothesis of an extraterrestrial artifact, designed to operate in dimensions beyond the 3 known. "Perhaps we aren't seeing the complete object," she speculated. "Only a slice of it, like a cube viewed through a crack in a door." The tension reached its peak when systems engineer René Varro discovered that the station's communication systems were sending information to unknown coordinates. No one claimed responsibility for the leak. That night, during dinner, Alec casually mentioned that the phenomenon had begun emitting a low-frequency hum, audible only when all equipment was switched off. "It's almost melodic," he said, and for a moment, no one dared to breathe. On the 39th day, a decision was made to send a reconnaissance team in a small vessel. Brianna, Alec, and Kiera entered the small capsule, while René and the others monitored from the station. The approach was slow, each kilometer traveled under palpable tension. When they were 100 meters from the phenomenon, the ship's lights failed. In the darkness, Alec realized that the hum had transformed into a rhythmic clicking sequence, like a code. Before anyone could react, the ship was pulled forward by an invisible force, passing through a membrane of light that didn't exist on the sensors. Inside the station, René watched the monitors go haywire. The telemetry data showed the ship in 2 places at once, inside and outside the hangar, in orbit and on the ground of a planet not marked on any map. When communication was re-established, Brianna's voice sounded distorted, as if coming from a great distance. "It's not an artifact," she said. "It's a portal. And it's not empty." The reconnaissance vessel materialized in a space that defied logic. The capsule's walls were intact, but the exterior had transformed into a labyrinth of pulsating lights, as if the vacuum itself had been woven into fractal patterns. Brianna clung to the console, her fingers trembling as she tried to process the data. The sensors indicated they were simultaneously moving and stationary, the ship orbiting Gliese 667c and floating in a starless void. Alec, his voice choked with emotion, pointed to a distant figure, a humanoid silhouette, yet disproportionate, walking towards them without touching the ground. "It's not a transmission. It's a presence," whispered Kiera, her eyes fixed on the approaching form. The entity, if it was an entity, had no defined face, only a surface that oscillated between solid and translucent. It extended a long limb, and the ship was flooded with a wave of heat followed by a bone-chilling cold. The life support systems collapsed, and for a moment, Brianna saw fragmented images, A ruined city under 3 suns, a field of dead stars, a face that resembled Alec's, but younger, smiling. On the station, Renee watched the monitors with a mixture of panic and fascination. The ship's data showed contradictory readings. The crew was alive, but their vital signs fluctuated as if they were in multiple locations simultaneously. Before he could alert the others, a second figure appeared on the screen, a woman in torn uniform, eyes white as snow, whispering in a language Renee didn't recognize. She extended a hand towards the camera, and the transmission cut out. Inside the ship, the air was thick, laden with a metallic smell that shouldn't exist in space. Kiera tried to record the phenomena on her data logger, but the words jumbled on the screen, transforming into symbols she couldn't decipher. Alec, on impulse, touched the ship's wall and felt a vibration that didn't correspond to the engine. It was a constant, hypnotic rhythm, like a heart beating in another dimension. "It was a mistake to come here," said Brianna, finally breaking the silence. "We aren't prepared for this." Her voice sounded distant, as if part of her was already elsewhere. Before anyone could respond, the figure before them dissolved, leaving behind a shimmering object, an irregular-edged polyhedron floating centimeters from the floor. Alec reached out to touch it, but Kiera stopped him. "We don't know what it is," she said, but her words were cut short by a flash of light. When the light subsided, the ship was back in the station's hangar, intact. The internal clock showed only 3 minutes since entering the portal, but the ship's log showed 14 hours of activity. Renee rushed to greet them, but stopped abruptly upon seeing their faces. Brianna, Alec, and Kiera were pale, their eyes hollow, as if they had aged years in minutes. "What happened in there?" asked Renee, hesitant. Brianna opened her mouth to answer, but only a guttural sound escaped. In her hand, hidden in the shadows, was the polyhedron, now opaque and cold, like a piece of obsidian. That night, as the crew tried to sleep, the object began emitting a soft glow, projecting geometric shapes onto the station's walls. Alec, unable to resist curiosity, approached and realized that the shapes formed a sequence, circles within triangles, spirals repeating in infinite scales. It was a language, he concluded, or perhaps a map. And somewhere in that complexity was a message directed at him. The polyhedron wasn't inert. Alec realized this when he noticed the projections changing with his breath, as if the object reacted to biological patterns. Kiera, regaining some composure, dragged herself to the station's lab and connected the artifact to a spectrometer. The results were inconclusive. The material had no measurable mass nor emitted radiation, but its internal structure seemed to contain infinite layers, like a physical fractal. "It's a paradox," she murmured, as the others gathered around her. "Something that exists and doesn't exist at the same time." Brianna, still shaken, ordered the object isolated. But later that night, Renee witnessed an impossible scene. The polyhedron moved on its own through the corridor, leaving luminous trails that vanished upon touch. He tried to grab it, but his hands passed through it, as if it were made of air. In the mess hall, the crew found marks on the wall, symbols identical to those projected by the artifact, now etched into the metal. At 5 in the morning, Alec awoke with a strange certainty. The object wanted something from him. He followed the light patterns to the engine room, where the polyhedron floated above the fusion reactor. As he approached, visions consumed him. He saw himself on a beach under 3 moons, holding the polyhedron, while a voice whispered, "We have waited for ages." When he tried to share the experience, the words caught in his throat, transforming into unintelligible sounds. Kiera discovered that the artifact was altering the station's records. Historical mission data had been rewritten, including references to events that never happened. In one of the logs, she read about a cosmic alliance and coordinates for unknown star systems. When she confronted Brianna, she received only an empty stare. "We cannot trust our own memories," said the coordinator, her voice devoid of emotion. The crisis reached its peak when the polyhedron emitted a frequency that shut down all the station systems. In the darkness, the crew heard footsteps echoing through the corridors. More footsteps than the number of people on board. Renee, armed with a flashlight, followed the sound to the storage room, where he found Alec standing motionless, the polyhedron glowing in his hands. His eyes were open, but without pupils, only spirals of light. "It's here," said Alec, in a voice that wasn't entirely his. "And it remembers." Brianna ordered the artifact ejected into space, but in their attempt, they discovered it was fused to the station's core. Kiera suggested the object wasn't a threat, but a test. "It's evaluating us," she argued, as geometric patterns emerged on her skin, like temporary tattoos. "And we are not worthy." On the final night before the final silence, the polyhedron projected an image onto the observation dome, a web of lines connecting billions of luminous points, each representing a civilization. Gliese 667c was just one among many, and Earth, a tiny point, was marked with a warning symbol. Alec, almost unrecognizable, smiled without joy. "They already knew," he said. "About us. About what we would do." When the station stopped transmitting, there was no explosion, no collapse. Only an emptiness where life had once existed, and a single polyhedron floating in the orbit of a forgotten star, ready to wait for more ages until another curious soul approached.